everyone! Welcome to Reading with Mecca. I am Lauren Mecca. Maybe you can see that I've literally upgraded. I'm now actually sitting on a chair instead of the ground. Now for any other starting out booktubers out there who are still sitting on the ground, get yourself a chair. It is so much better. Today I'm going to talk about the books that stood out to me that I read in March. Initially I was going to do March and April together, but it turns out I read a lot in March and a lot of good books, so I had to trim down that list and I still had too much, so we're doing March separately. I have 6 books to talk about, so let's get cracking. The first book I want to talk about is Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. This book does a lot of things that I like. It's a family saga, it spans across a couple of generations, it's historical fiction, it's in another country, it's about living in another country than where you're from. All things I like. This book starts in the early 90s where we meet Sunja, who lives in Korea. She meets a man who becomes her lover and she gets pregnant by him, which puts her in a situation that she did not want to be in. Luckily for her, a client of her mother's boarding house decides he wants to marry her despite her situation, and together they leave for Japan. Now at the time, and I'm afraid to admit I did not know this, Korea was a colony, I suppose we could say, of Japan. So it made sense for them to go to the main country to find a better life. In Japan, they start living with his brother and his sister-in-law, and we get to read how their lives evolve with their children, with the hardships that they face, being Koreans in Japan and the discrimination that they face. He is a religious person. I think he's a priest, and he gets into, let's put it lightly, he gets into trouble for that. We read about how their lives, but also later the lives of their children and even grandchildren evolve. I really like this book. I really like to read about the struggle of being Korean in Japan and the prejudices, and how especially the children don't want to be Korean because they don't feel Korean. They've never been there. And how later on they have to have a Korean passport and they have to indicate whether they're from South or North Korea. But when their parents left, there was no South and North Korea, and they haven't been to Korea. So that whole situation just does not make sense. I was very interested in the characters, especially all of the characters in the family. The second part of the book does start going into directions for me it did not need to go. We meet characters that are not directly linked to the family, and their storylines are interesting, but the book could have done without. All in all, I absolutely loved this book. Like I said, it ticked many boxes. I loved reading about their lives and the problems that they face, especially in the historical background of the time, with at one point World War II going on, with the separation between North and South Korea, and the bombing of Nagasaki. I mean, it's impressive when you read a book and a character goes to Nagasaki and it's at the end of the Second World War, and you're like, you shouldn't do that. That's going to be bad. That will stay with me for a while. The second book I want to talk about is Kwartet by Anna Enquist. This title translates to a quartet, a string quartet. Quatuor? I think it's quartet. Quartet. Don't know. You get what I mean. 4 people playing string instruments. We meet 5 characters. 4 are playing in this string quartet, and the 5th one is the cello teacher of the cello player. This book is so well written. The characters all have their own struggles, and despite there being 5 of them, all their struggles were meaningful. You have 2 characters that struggle with the loss of, I'm not going to say what, because spoiler, and the consequences that has for their relationship. We have a character that struggles with being always the helpful person. We have a character that is going to lose his job, and we have a character that is an elderly man and lives at home alone and is completely paranoid about anything that is going to happen. The thing that links them all together and the theme that goes throughout the book is the love of music and how music helps them all get better, and how now we value sports a lot and what sports does to us, but we forget the value of art in general and music in specific. This book really explained that. It also talks about, like I said, loss and the loneliness of elderly and how we deal with that in society, which is wonderful. Now, at the end of the book, there's a thrillery part, and I imagine not everybody likes that because it doesn't fit with the rest of the atmosphere in the book, but it does bring some kind of weird energy, and some things start happening just at the end. So I recommend this book. I have read other books by her, and this is by far her best. It also really made me want to pick up my violin again, which I haven't touched for 2 years, and I'm ashamed to say I didn't. Maybe purely for that, I should reread this again. Anywho, Anna Enquist. She's Dutch, by the way. Didn't mention it. Dutch book. I want to talk about took me completely by surprise. I did not know I was going to like it as much as I did. I thought it was just going to be this quick book. Hop, got it off my TBR. And it is The Offing by Benjamin Myers. Now, this book takes place after the Second World War, and we meet Robert, who is destined to have a life in the mining pits. And before he goes down, he decides to take a break and go on a holiday and go for a walk through the north of England and just enjoy the nature and enjoy not being in a dark hole the whole time before he's ever been there. On his trip, he meets Dulce, who is completely different, and they end up spending time together. He repairs her shed and helps with her garden, and she's this worldly person that has read all of these books and knows how to enjoy life. So she feeds him, she gives him wine, she makes him read books. Basically, she shows him a life different from what he has learned. And she helps him accept basically that the life that he's supposed to have, he is not going to like. And he already kind of knew that, but she helps him come to terms with that. And on his turn, he helps her come to terms with some things that have happened in her past. The thing that made this book wonderful is not necessarily the characters, because from the beginning we kind of know where his story is going. The feeling that we get while reading, it's as if you're on a holiday. Basically, I was with them when they were drinking their wine and eating their marvelous food and feeling the breeze on my skin, and with the sea in front of me and all the wonderful places that they were. I loved the nature writing in this most of all. It felt like an escape. It was wonderful. All in all, I just appreciated being in the nature with these poetic souls, and it made me escape for a while. So that was really nice. The next book I want to talk about is Hersenschimmen by J. Bernlef. This book has been translated in English with the title Out of Mind, which completely captures what it's about. We meet Maarten, who is originally from Holland but now lives in the US, and starting one day, Maarten's brain starts failing him, and we read about his quick decline and how heartbreaking that is. In the beginning, he just can't remember where he put things, or he can't really remember what he just did before, but before long, he forgets that he doesn't have a job anymore because he's 70, and he starts just turning up at his old job, and he is angry with his wife for moving stuff, and he can't remember that his kids aren't in the house anymore. He starts losing his memories, and he starts and the consequences that has. Very quickly, his wife realizes that she needs help because she can't leave him alone, because then he just wanders off, and that gets him into difficult situations. So she gets help, and she explains that to him, but can't remember needing help. He doesn't realize what he's going through, basically. So in the beginning, he can't remember why they have help and who she is, so they have to keep explaining that to him. But before long, he can't remember his wife. He can't remember to eat. He can't remember that he needs to go to the toilet. As we see this all through his eyes, the confusion that he has is so in your face, and he just doesn't know that he's missing things, and It's heartbreaking. It helps understand a tiny bit what it's like to be in such a situation, especially because with him it's so fast, and at the end he's just random words and it's all confusion, and he has no idea where he is, who the people are. He doesn't feel anything anymore, and it was, like I said, heartbreaking, but such a good book. Fifth, only one to go after this, is the Karamazov Brothers by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Honestly, I was thinking about whether to talk about this book or no, and in the end, I just want to brag about the fact that I read this. I read this with a couple of friends in my book club, which really helped, because honestly, I don't know whether I would have put up with it if I didn't have that end goal of at least we can discuss it together and hate on it together in mind. Now we meet the Karamazov family, the father, the 3 to 4 brothers. On the back it says that this book is about Fyodor Karamazov being murdered and the consequences that that has for his children. So I knew this going in, but the death, the murder, only happens in the second part of the book, which was very confusing. I was reading the first part and you're just waiting for this death to happen, and it just didn't happen. The first part is you've got a lot of monologues about faith and the role of faith in society, which honestly wasn't my cup of tea, but I know people that did like it. And the second part has a lot more action and a lot more stuff happening, and it's just about these weird decisions that these weird people take, and you're reading this and you're like, why are you doing this, weird person? So that was entertaining. Overall, this book could have been so much shorter. I understand that the advantages of having a big book is that everybody will find something that they will like, but at the same time, everybody will like something that they will hate. And what I disliked most was how huge it is, and how and it's not even written big. I mean, it's still kind of tiny little font in here, and sometimes, especially in the monologue parts, you would have pages on pages without paragraphs, and then my first world problem life gets hard. Overall, I'm just happy that I finished it, and that I can, when someone talks about the Brothers Karamazov, say, oh yeah, I've read that! But really, that's it. And I'm thinking now, why did I give this book 4 stars on Goodreads? And I have no idea. I need to rethink that decision, I think. But still, even in 50 years, I will be able to say I have read this book. What I want to talk about briefly is completely different. It is fantasy, and it is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I'm not going to talk about this very long. We meet 4 characters in a world with dragons and grims. There are different countries which all have a different belief system and a different political system, and these countries have to deal with the upcoming big bad guy. Spoiler alert, it's a dragon. Or a rim, can't remember. There are a couple of things I really liked in this book. First of all, I love that now in fantasy, women finally have a role to play. In a lot of these countries, there were women in power, and there were a couple of queer relationships, and I love that that is finally an option. And I mean, I love Lord of the Rings, for example, but there were 3 women in there, and they don't do that much, to be honest. So this is, for that reason, this is a breath of fresh air, and it still had, while still having that complex life that we also see in Middle-earth, for example. And I really appreciated the complexity of this world and the clash of the different religions and the different politics that made the world really real to me. Overall, I really like this. I mean, I'm fine with reading about dragons once in a while, and I love the color of the cover. This is such a happy book to have in your bookcase. Now, those were all of the books that I wanted to talk about. I would love to hear from you if you've read any of these, if you love them, or if you didn't like them. I realize they are completely different, but if you have any recommendations of things in those same veins, I am here for it. So talk to me in the comments, and I will see you later. Bye!